The house our dad owned was sold behind our backs so that our mom could buy her new unemployed husband a boat. But he left her for another woman. She spent all the money and now wants to live with me. My mother, who is 50 years old, has had a strange life. My grandparents thought women should take care of the house and family, even though she wasn't too smart in school. She holds on to these ideas from her past. She got married to my dad 2 years after she graduated at age 20. She had my 29F sister Jasmine first, and then I, 27F Bianca, 2 years later. My sister and I have always loved our dad the most. He didn't agree with Mom and was there for her. He always there, pushed us to do well in school, and signed us up for lots of recreational activities. I like to draw, so my dad gave me a lot of art supplies. My sister was good at soccer, so my dad never let her miss practice. He was always there for us. This made my mom mad. She didn't like our hobbies. She didn't like how smart we were or how much our dad supported us, which hurt her reputation in her family. My mom's parents didn't like us. When I was 11, my dad died, which changed everything. He wrecked his car. He passed away after being in the hospital for a few days. This broke my mom's heart and her bank account. Of course, for us too. We were out of money, but I won't talk about how painful it was for us emotionally. We didn't have enough insurance, so Dad's hospital stay cost a lot of money. He paid off most of his debts with his money, while my mother had none because she was out of work. I remember selling a lot of things a few weeks after he died. I sold my art supplies, my sister stopped soccer practice, and my sister and I did chores. I didn't like anything about how my life changed. Because I needed my mom, I couldn't get anything done. Then my grandparents on my dad's side helped. They lived 3 states away, so we didn't see each other very often. But whenever I met them, they were always nice. My grandpa was shocked when he saw that my mom had sold my things to make money. He offered to pay for our interests and hobbies, but my mom said no because we needed money to live. She told him to send money to buy food or energy. She could work to make ends meet, and my grandpa would pay for the extra fees when he got mad. He would help us stay alive if she did her job. That was all my mother said when she said no. My mom wasn't working yet because she was still getting help from family. There were mistakes in the papers. There was less in some months and more in others. We got a lot of help from her parents. She wouldn't work because she thought that the men in her family should take care of her. After a while, her parents felt sorry for her in the US and took care of us. But that money stopped coming in quickly. We did odd jobs because our mom was broke. Every weekend, we went to a neighbor's house to do things like walk their dog, pull weeds in their yard, etc. Mom still didn't work. Her parents finally had enough and brought her down to talk. They told her they couldn't help us anymore because they were planning to retire and didn't have the money to do so. Mom was shocked because she thought that her dad would take care of us after Dad died, since men do that. Because my grandparents raised her. That way, it was impossible to disagree with this point. It was like they were changing the tune. They said that men should help their wives. If the husband dies, the wife has to take care of the kids. They cut her off because my mom and her sister were told that their brother would take everything they had. Even though there was a crap show with crying and calling people names, my grandparents wouldn't move. Auntie Janice was asked to help Mom. Aunt Janice was a nice person who loved us. She married a doctor. He was willing to help even though they didn't talk to us much. My mom moved back in with my dad's parents because their income wasn't enough for a family of 3. If my mom worked, my grandpa would help. We needed their help to stay alive, so she had to give in. Her job as a housekeeper at a nearby hotel paid well, and things got back to normal for us. Our uncle and grandfather made things better for us again. This deal went for 2 years, until my sister was 16 and I was 14. Mother put us in touch with Dan. Dan wanted to marry her. He was her new boyfriend. Jasmine and I were disgusted by how he looked. Without a doubt, he smelt and looked like a pig. He didn't look like he had washed since high school. He smelt like cigarettes and looked like he was lost because he couldn't hear anything. Jasmine and I didn't just dislike him, we hated him. Mom unfortunately claimed to love him very much. Jasmine and I swore not to tell anyone about the wedding. It was a secret that Mom had married someone else. She was afraid that if our grandparents found out, they would stop giving us money every month, which we really needed because it was so kind of them. My friend Jasmine and I went quiet. No one knows what Mom thought when she married Dan. She likely thought that once she got married, Her husband would take care of everything and she wouldn't have to work. She quit her job and moved back in with her husband a week after they got married, so she probably thought that. The problem was that Dan was always unemployed. He could only work for 2 months. After that, he played computer games at home and might have looked for another job when he got bored. He didn't want to help us, so Mom's hopes were dashed. Jasmine and I went back to working different jobs to make money. Our family of 4 got most of our money from my dad's parents or the husband of my mom's sister. We both wanted to leave because it wasn't working. We didn't see Mom and Dan very often because we were busy with school and part-time work. This went on for 4 years, until I went to college and didn't talk to my mom as much. Dan was jobless and a serial cheater, which didn't come as a surprise to any of us. Just as I was leaving, Mom and Dan were having problems. Mom kept avoiding or forgiving him, but it was a mess. After I graduated, I didn't talk to my mom very much. Because I talked to my grandparents, aunt and uncle, my mom always knew what was going on. I finished college when I was 23 and got a good job. I finished before COVID, which made things hard. My raises and advances were not very big. Life slowed down because I didn't save as much as I had planned. I said no to my great-grandpa's help because I didn't want to bother him. I shouldn't be upset because I wasn't fired. It was a few months ago that I got a big rise at work. I was able to buy a small house because I had saved money at COVID. One of my goals was to live cheaply. This meant I would have to wait 2 years to buy a house by the time I turned 25. I was thrilled. How did my mom find out I bought a house? She called me because it had been a while since she saw her child. I knew something was wrong because her last visit was during my last term of college. I never asked her to meet up with me again, and she never said yes. I told her I'd get back to her when I was free, but I never did. She told me I had to tell her right away because it was very important. I said goodbye and ended the talk because I knew she was after something. After 2 days, she called me again and asked for my help with something. She said she had heard that I bought a house and planned to move in with Dan before I could help. It was their dream to live with me. I laughed at her cockiness. I told her I couldn't believe Dan was still there and hoped she had left. She asked if I had a house or an apartment with a balcony. I told her no. We couldn't fit all 3 of us. I wasn't ready to tell her I didn't want her. I thought the issue of size and room would turn her off. I was too hopeful. She told me I could leave the 1-bedroom flat open for Dan and her to move in. I told her that wasn't possible. The rent was due, and I hadn't meant to let someone else live in my house. When I charged her market rent, she lost it. I was yelled at because she said it was crazy that I would take rent from my mom and that she hadn't taught her girls how to be leeches. I told her to go beg for food somewhere because I didn't have time for her or yelling. I put her on hold and hung up. When I asked Jasmine if her mom had called, she said no. The last time they talked was a month ago, when Mom asked her where she lived. Jasmine told her mom that she had moved in with her boyfriend and was saving money to buy a house. What was the point of Mom's need for a place to stay? The house our dad used to own was kept by her. When we were kids, Dan moved in with us. It didn't make sense for her to move. I called my paternal grandparents to talk about the house. I finally got what was going on. My grandfather owned the house where we grew up. When my grandparents died, it was supposed to go to my dad. It was decided that my dad and his brother, Uncle Liam, could live with my grandfather for free. They got off to a great start and were able to buy a house for their kids. My grandfather legally owned the house where we grew up. My grandmother demanded that my grandfather take care of the house in his name so that Jasmine and I could get it when my dad died. Grandpa didn't want to make things harder for Mom because she was out of work. He probably felt bad for her, which is why he gave my mom the house when she asked for it. We agreed to buy the house when I turned 25, and Jasmine turned 27. I think this is why Mom told us not to tell anyone that she married Dan. Grandpa says the word got around. They were mad that she kept the new marriage a secret. They planned to change who owned the house right away. They insisted on filing the papers so that Dan and Mom couldn't use the house because I was almost 1 and Jasmine was an adult. But Mom told them in a smart way that Dan had broken up with her for another woman a few weeks after they told everyone they were going to get married. Because she couldn't stop crying, my grandparents stopped talking about who owned what. Over time, they forgot about it. That was the last time they talked about the house with her. After that, they only talked to each other sometimes. I told Grandpa that Mom had called to say she wanted to move in with Dan. What did happen to your dad's house? He was interested because he didn't know if she was moving or back with Dan. This is causing me trouble, and I expect more trouble soon. To everyone who is surprised that I didn't know such important things about my mom's life, this is because I don't talk to her much. I chose to ignore her and don't feel bad about it. I left the house and her life when I turned 18. Since then, we have been only friends. That's why I didn't know Dan had left her or would come back. We were too young to know about the home, so Jasmine and I didn't. We thought our mom and grandma would watch out for us, so owning land or a house never came up. Grandpa and grandma never talked about it with us because we were kids and our mom was supposed to take care of us ... not cheat on us. My friend Jasmine and I don't know what happened to Dad's house, but we'll ask our mom and maybe plan a rescue. I'll let you know. Update 1 has bad news. I met with my mom, her boyfriend, my grandparents, and myself 2 weeks after my first post to find out what was going on. She was shocked when we showed up because we hadn't told her. The best part? A young couple answered the door when we went to see our dad. We thought they were Dan's family or Mom's friends, but they claimed ownership. I wanted to laugh because I didn't believe them. What they said was true. For some reason, my mom sold the house without telling me, Jasmine, or my grandparents. It's interesting that the deal happened almost 6 months ago. She sold our house in secret 6 months ago, and we can't do anything about it now. My grandparents never signed the papers and transferred the title, but she was officially the owner and could sell the house. Everyone was shocked and angry about this. We looked for where she lived. It was a 1-bedroom flat in a sketchy part of downtown that was full of junkies. I wasn't surprised because Dan lived here. It made sense, given how much like an addict he looked. Mom was as white as a ghost when she saw all of us lined up. She tried to keep us out, but we wouldn't let her. We were lucky to have Jasmine's boyfriend with us. He's a strapping man, 6'A", and pretty intimidating. We forced our way inside, and there was Dan, lounging on the sofa with a cigarette in his hand and a dazed look on his face. Mom nervously greeted us, but we went straight for the jugular. I told her I knew Dad's house was supposed to go to us, and she had sold it without informing Jasmine, me, or our grandparents. She burst out crying, saying that if she hadn't done it, Dan wouldn't have come back. Basically, she launched into this long sob story about how Dan had left her twice for 2 different women. When Mom had that conversation with Grandpa about the house and told him Dan had left, he had actually left. She had to beg and plead for him to come back. He finally returned when he got kicked out of his new girlfriend's house. Then, a year later, Mom caught him cheating with a girl barely out of her teens. I just looked at her like she was insane. I asked why she hadn't left him when he was so problematic and wasn't helping her out in any way. She had no response to that, and I didn't have the patience to feel sorry for her. My grandmother, she was furious. She screamed at Mom, telling her she wasn't interested in hearing excuses for why she'd been such a colossal failure. All she cared about was the house that was supposed to go to Jasmine and me. Mom said she'd sold the house because Dan wanted to buy a boat. Now, this man knows nothing about boats. All I know is that he worked as a coast guard for a couple of months at a beach a few miles away, and that's when he decided he wanted a boat. He threatened to leave Mom again if she didn't help him buy one. So my mother, the biggest genius on the planet, sold her house and used part of the money to buy this idiot a boat. The rest of the money, instead of saving, she gave to him. He spent all of it. Every single dime. When they had nothing left, he had to sell the boat and buy this condo they were living in. And guess what they hated? That's why Mom wanted to ask if I could let her and Dan stay with me. After she finished her story, she admitted, in defeat, that she was sure I wouldn't let her live with me anymore. Before I could say anything, Jasmine tore into her, and boy was she brutal. She listed all the ways Mom had failed us as a mother and failed Dad as a wife. She had robbed us of the one thing that would have kept us connected to our father, just to support her deadbeat husband who didn't care about her. She told Mom she was dead to her and should never expect to hear from her again. I couldn't say much because I was still in shock, but I agreed with Jasmine. There was nothing I wanted to do with my mother. Mom started sobbing, saying she didn't deserve to be treated like this. We told her she did. She had stolen from us, from our grandparents. And most importantly, she had robbed us of a connection with our childhood and our father. We weren't going to forgive her ever. We left. Since then, she's tried calling us and our grandparents, but none of us are speaking to her. There's nothing we can do about the house. That money and property are gone for good. I'm considering saving up and buying it if it ever gets listed again because I don't want to lose that part of my childhood. But I know it's a far-fetched dream and not very practical. My grandparents are furious and heartbroken, but there's nothing they can do either. Grandpa keeps cursing himself for trusting her, and we keep telling him he couldn't have known she would do this. It's just a sad state of affairs, and we all feel helpless. Update 2. Dan left Mom again. I know it sounds cruel, but I love every bit of it. Apparently, she's been trying to get in touch with us, using new numbers and whatnot, but neither Jasmine nor I have responded. She tried to involve Annie Janice. I got a call from her last week, asking me to talk to Mom. I told her not to get involved and spilled everything to her. She was horrified because she didn't know the house was supposed to go to us. She apologized for trying to take Mom's side and has since blocked her. Whatever little updates I got from Mom were through Auntie Janice, and she told me Dan had left her. Mom is now homeless with nowhere to go. Auntie Janice and her husband were initially willing to take her in, but after they learned what Mom did to us, they put their foot down and said no. Yesterday, I got an email from Mom. She basically said she was down and out, homeless, and had nowhere to go. She asked me to let her stay with me while she looked for a job. I know it's a lie. She's not going to look for a job. And if I take her in, she'll never leave. I haven't responded yet because I don't want her here. But I also feel bad about letting her live on the streets. She genuinely has no one who would be willing to help her. I know she brought this on herself, and she's the only one to blame, but I can't help feeling sorry for her. I hope I don't cave because I know if I do, she'll ruin my life. Update 3. I told Jasmine about Mom's email, and she said she got something similar. She hadn't responded either, but said that deep down, she was tempted to help her. Jasmine told me she'd support my decision but advised me to think it through carefully because we both know what Mom is like, and if I let her in, she'll control and destroy whatever peace I have. After a long talk, Jasmine knocked some sense into me, thankfully. I ended up responding to Mom. I wrote her a long email, telling her I wouldn't help her, neither now nor ever. I let everything out: the betrayal, the anger, the resentment, and the disgust. I marked her email as spam, so I don't know if she's responded. I did send her contacts for some women's shelters that could help her, but that's as far as I'll go. She has been emotionally negligent and financially malicious our whole lives, and she doesn't deserve our help anymore. I don't know what she's going to do, and I've asked Auntie Janice to keep me out of it. I don't need updates on her life. She's not my mother anymore, and she was the worst part of my childhood. I'm ready to leave her behind.